In the curious cultural case of the Walt Disney Company and Rachel Zegler versus Snow White, the animated classic that made Disney what it is, well, the only person that seems to be losing in that battle is money, specifically shareholder money. And once again, our friends over at Forbes magazine are throwing us here at the Renegade Nation a little bit of street cred. Yeah, once again, for the fourth time now, your old boy Valiant Renegade has been cited in a major Forbes publication as being right. And it's not like we're wizards of this. It's just simple common observation, simple putting the numbers together and coming up with a reasonable conclusion. And that is that by the end of the day, the Snow White production, I said a year ago, would cost at least $300 million when all's said and done. And that number is probably going to be a lot higher, probably now closer to $400 million. And thanks to Caroline Reed for pointing that out. And that came to us courtesy of more recent filings for Snow White in the UK with the financial receipts. And we're going to talk about some of those today and Caroline's more recent findings. Here we go. Renegade Online.
How to kill a movie in 10 minutes.
All right, so our friend Caroline Reed has put up another article in the past couple of days here about the Snow White stuff. And the breakdown, I want to go into all the details because there's a lot of stuff you guys already know. But this has to do with a recently updated financial filing for Snow White. We're talking about how bad Snow White is, how bad Rachel Zegler has been for this. So we've got this new article here from Caroline Reed, and this has to do with some of the film tax credits. Recently, Snow White and the associated production entity, the production entity that houses corporately the Snow White stuff for Disney over in the UK, which is how she's able to garner this information. Okay, well, I'm going to actually show you the financial return here in just a minute. But Caroline goes in here talking about how Disney saved $55.5 million on the Snow White remake. Now, what you have to understand, like we talked about earlier, the film tax credits in the UK that we explained, roughly 25%, up to 25% of eligible expenses, below-the-line expenses, things like what you pay to rent, say, Shenfield Studios or Pinewood Studios, what you pay for British labor to build a set, run a camera, operate a set, do all this kind of stuff, catering, so on and so forth. You're not getting film tax credits for what you pay the director, what you pay the actors, what you pay Rachel Zegler in this case, which hopefully wasn't a whole lot, what you pay Gal Gadot. Don't get tax credits for those. So that $55.5 million film tax credit is what has accrued up through the last reporting period for this film as of now. Now, in order to get that $55 million, you have to spend a pretty dandy amount of money to get up there. So let's scroll back down and find out what we're talking about. In September of last year, September of 2023, Caroline Reed revealed in the Daily Mail that by July 31st of 2022, Disney had already spent a massive $183 million on making Snow White, even though it wasn't originally due to come out until March of 24, which of course now we know, as Caroline points out, is going to be March of 25 due to the delay. But the dark cloud still did not dissipate after this disclosure. Of course, there was more to come. Last month, there was yet another bombshell when this author also revealed that by the end of December of 2023, spending on the movie had surged to $269.4 million, forcing Disney to admit that its filings in the film was forecasted to be over the production budget. So $270 million, okay? And, of course, we all know what the trailer looked like. But she goes down here to show some of the breakdown that she's done additional research here. And it also shows some of the film tax credits. And you can see here, we're looking at a total cost, there in red, of about $270 million. A film tax credit of about $55.5 million so far. Okay? So when we tell you that this movie, when I said that this movie is likely going to pitch out at the end of the day of around $400+ million, well, I got news for you. It seems that Caroline is somewhat in agreement here. I believe she has a figure that she puts in. I need to go down and find it. I think it may be towards the end here. And she talks about some of the specifics of how the financing works with British labor and whatnot. So I would encourage everyone to go in there. In September last year, this author forecast that Snow White would have to gross $340 million at the box office to break even. But the increase in its costs since then has pushed the threshold closer to $430 million. So in other words, just based on the net cost, what she's saying is at $430 million, we're getting up to that point now. And again, that's only on what the production costs have been so far. But we're looking at a production that is going to end up over north and getting close to $400 million. I love this last paragraph. As the cost is already $269.4 million. And again, that is as of December 31st of last year. That was just roughly 2 months after they announced the film would be delayed an entire year. And they're reshooting the whole thing. In other words, there is an enormous, and I mean an absolutely stunningly enormous amount of costs that have not accrued in these reports yet. It would be great if we got one in the not too distant future. I have a feeling it will be well into next year. I have a feeling we won't see another filing until after the movie releases, which really sucks. I'd love to get it before. But Caroline says here, as the cost is already at $269.4 million, an increase should push it almost precisely in line with the estimate from expert film industry pundit Valiant Renegade. Oh, I know that guy. In September of last year, he assessed that Disney's Snow White remake will cost $300 million. It's almost there, and we'll find out how close it gets when the next set of financial statements are filed. By then, the movie will have been released in the theaters, so we will also finally know whether it's likely to give Disney a happy ending. Okay, so what she's saying there, and I did say at least $300 million, but again, this was before. That was before, I think, we knew of how much reshooting was going on. And since then, I have revised my figure upward. I said we will be pushing $400 million all in on production. Now, that's gross expenditure. Gross. Meaning that it may be $375 million. It may be $350 million after they net out what is probably going to be a ridiculously huge film tax credit. They've already gotten $55 million in film tax credits back based on what they've already spent, $270 million. If the gross spend of this movie exceeds $400 million, the total film tax credit might be close to $80, and then maybe get the net cost back down to $320. So that's where the $300 million is coming in on the net side after the film tax credit. But I think the gross spend, almost certainly, with the amount of rework they've had to do since this last filing, December 31st of 2023, there is no way that this thing is going to finish for less or much less than $400 million. All the post-production work has to get redone because of all the animated dwarves they didn't have before. They had 7 actual physical actors on the set. Don't have those anymore. They've been replaced by those crazy, ugly, creepy things, which is ironically even creepier than what they had before. But thank you, Caroline. I appreciate the shout out as always.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.